For entrepreneurs, I would say ship, baby, ship. Get it off PowerPoint, get it into code, get it into people's hands. You don't know really what you're doing and where you're going to end up until you're doing it.
That's Eric Pulier, 16-time founder who raised over $1.5 billion, pioneered smart NFTs years before they were mainstream, and built companies across AI, cloud computing, and blockchain that led to multiple acquisitions.
You look at the companies that I've started, most of the ones that are the most successful did not come out of a brilliant innovation. Everything came from being in conversations like this with people who actually really know what they're doing, trying to solve problems, and just listening.
In our honest interview, he reveals how he lost everything in the dot-com crash, beat federal charges after a 5-year fight that most people would have settled, and explains why creativity and love are the real antidotes to chaos.
I was, according to the Wall Street Journal, one of the top 20 money losers in the United States. My marriage did not continue at that moment. I lost more money than I had.
And now he builds future-shaping technologies while proving identity comes from within, not accomplishments.
I can't say it was easy suddenly, but allowed the mindset that happened when I shifted around the spirit of play and the spirit of creativity versus the spirit of like, what the hell is going on and why me and how do I get through the day, allowed me to become creative again and to listen again.
What's up, guys? I'm Jeff. I'm a serial entrepreneur and investor. And on this podcast, I sit down with the world's top founders to unpack how they actually build, scale, and think to help entrepreneurs get the tools and inspiration they need to succeed. Let's take it back to the beginning. One of the chapters in the book is all about discovering your big idea, the aha, the need that you're trying to fulfill. You've had 16 ahas. Those are probably not including all the things he didn't decide to spend the next 4 or 5 years working on. Talk to me about your first.
My first company was really in high school, doing just learning about what is a company and trying to put some things together. It wasn't an aha moment. It was, there's a such thing as a company. What do people do? Later, when I was out in LA, I actually came out here to direct music videos and to write because I was trying to get away from that compulsion to start companies. It's miserable to do it, but you have to do it. There's some benefits also, obviously, but you have to really, really want to do it. So I was just out looking for interesting things to do and how to make some money while doing it, and started to look at how to apply various technologies and creativity against large problems that I stumbled into. So one of the first companies I did, I recognized that people would pay you to solve problems that you can then turn into companies. So I started something called People Doing Things. And people say, well, what do you do? It's like, what do you got? And they would tell me a problem that clearly, if it existed, they'd buy the product. So they would pay us to solve the problem. We sell it to everybody.
So you almost created your own incubator based on other people's ideas. You'd essentially flip the model. You'd find your first customer first that's willing to pay for something. You'd solve the problem and create a company out of that?
That's right. And you can't help but innovate when you're trying to solve a problem, especially when you're doing it with fun, interesting people. You stumble on things that create innovations because obviously you're solving problems. I think one of the first innovations that I can recall was we built one of the first kiosks. There was no such thing as touch screens. So the first kind of overlays on screens where it could pick up your touch were there, and we started to create kiosks out of it. I made one for the Sundance Film Festival and stumbled on the idea that people would come over if you blew popcorn smell into the environment, and attracted a lot of people. Huge innovation for anyone looking for a company. Popcorn smell. It's incredibly attractive. I mean, it was like pheromone, I guess.
What was the first company you worked on that actually blew up in terms of whether venture raising or number of employees?
The first company was kind of a evolution of that, and by no coincidence, therefore, we called Digital Evolution. And I think it was the first incubator in Southern California. It was set up for that purpose to be kind of a relevance engine to attract dollars into the system, but more importantly, relevance that you could then apply to creating IP that could become companies. Now, what I learned, and was an incredibly valuable lesson that I try to apply ever since in digital evolution, is that if you try to go for that model, what happens is if you're successful at it, people will hire you to do interesting things. To do interesting things, you have to hire other people to help you. And for some bizarre reason, they keep wanting to get paid every 2 weeks again. And I said, I already paid you 2 weeks ago. Like, again? Okay. Again. So then you got to get more gigs. You got to pay them again. And so what happens is you can become a victim of your own success. Now, luckily for me, in that regard, we were creating interesting companies that came out of it. But as this grew from like 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, we started doing some M&A. We ended up with 1,000 people. The emergence of the web really became wildly significant, like earth-shattering in terms of society. And people started to recognize that in the late 90s. So we were able to take that company public. And I think that was the first one. The first investor that I took on there was Paul Allen. We had, I'm not especially proud of this, but this is when Netscape started to find its way. I got into the business when my brother called me and said, you got to see this overlay that this guy, Mark Andreessen, was a student at University of Illinois. You put this hypertext layer on the internet, and it's like wild what you can do. We were doing things with hypertext, but to put it on the entire internet, suddenly the light bulb goes off and says, okay, nothing's ever going to be the same. You drop everything, go after that. And then Microsoft decided that this was a threat. They were going to choke the oxygen supply for the antitrust stuff. And they went after it, and we had an opportunity to kind of think about what would a browser be and what would the next generation of that be. So in that context, I was able to bring a lot of people smarter than me to the table, notably my brother and lots of others, and build that company that really kicked off, was one of the groups that kicked off that kind of first internet bubble.
So a seismic shift in the world. We're going to get to it. There's a seismic shift happening today, and we're going to talk about that a lot. But that was your first career seismic shift. So how did you evolve from there? Did you start something new after that company went public?
Yeah, what I realized is, if you look at the companies that I've started, most of the ones that are the most successful did not come out of a brilliant innovation from me. Sometimes I get credit for oh, you were a visionary because you did this and then the market came to it. There's only one, and I can describe what that is, that kind of came more organically. By the way, at my bar down here, Harvell's, anyone who wants to join me for a beer on 4th Street. That one really came from a different set of circumstances, but almost everything came from being in conversations like this with people who actually really know what they're doing, trying to solve problems, and just listening and saying, "Oh, that's a significant issue. That's on the horizon for you. Like either a threat is looming, or you must solve this in a major way, and it's not solved. Would you buy this if it was? Would you become a reference for us if it was? Would you even chip in to get this done?" You don't want to get fully paid for this stuff because the IP can flow out the door. But if you can arrange a way to collaborate with someone who really has the issue, you end up in a great situation. So for me, once the internet came in, it was a game shifter, but then there were almost like, I'm going to call them mini, but next stage macro trends. And I was able to create a company almost around each one of them. Like, for instance, one of the first open source companies. You could see it very clearly coming up, open source as a model. APIs. I wrote a book around this, so service-oriented architectures, Lego pieces instead of monolithic stacks. Well, if you're going to have APIs, you have to have API management and API security and places to look them up and ways to connect them. That comes from people telling you what they need. Cloud was the next big one. Like when Microsoft, I guess Amazon first started to say, well, we're going to let other people use our infrastructure. Every single company in the world said, never. We will never outsource any part of this to cloud. So it was very clear that was going to happen, but you'd need some kind of hybrid cloud solution. So that's where I started to build hybrid cloud governance and management with the largest companies of the world that were saying, we can't keep our current model, but we can't go to the new one, and just learning and building around that.
I just want to take a moment to talk about something that's really important to me. and something I've been working on for years. If you like these conversations with founders, the mindset shifts, and the real questions behind building companies, I go much deeper on all that in my book, High Five Energy. I wrote it for people who are thinking about starting something or who already have, but want to lead with more clarity and purpose. The book gives you practical tools to get into high five energy flow state, attract the right people, and build in a way that actually feels aligned. High Five Energy includes interviews with 18 legendary founders who've had over $200 billion in exits and IPOs. If you're new to entrepreneurship or even just considering taking the leap, this book is for you. High Five Energy is available now wherever books are sold, or hit the link below. Would you find those large partners first before you decided to build?
Yes, but I wouldn't find them in a way that you would call scientific. I would find them in ways that are more fun and interesting, like having lunch with someone that you admire. And it's not very transactional. It's more about curiosity. It's not like, oh, I wish I had something to do for my next company or what's next. It's more like, wow, this person's like wildly interesting and incredibly smart. What can I learn from them? And for a price of lunch, you learn a lot, and hopefully you can deliver more value than you're taking. But at the same time, these relationships with people that are out there in the world doing things, solving problems, running into roadblocks, it just fuels you and creates, I think, a lot of interesting opportunity to then execute against.
How important was that theme of asking people for advice, taking people to lunch, just the general sitting down with another human being to talk about stuff as part of your career and how things evolved?
I think it's vital. I think of people like Andy Brown, for instance, who's this brilliant guy who was CIO of most banks, if you could just list them, CTOs, whatever, chief architect. There's people like this who have such a clear ability to think clearly across domains and just offer tidbits of knowledge and philosophy, frankly, on life that kind of combine with other forces, our own experience, other people you meet, and you're like, wow, really? That's how it works? And why does it work that way? Oh, just because it always has, not because it should. So those kind of moments come from from listening a lot more than talking.
Would you say that you're a curious person?
I would say that's what I enjoy most. That's my hobby, is being curious and following up on those itches. Yeah.
So we've hit the high level. So I want you to put yourself, just to ground ourselves in what those companies did. Just choose 5 of your companies. Put yourself in the mindset of the younger version of you as the CEO. Give me the one-line pitch for, let's say, 5 of the companies that you built. If you were to meet someone at a networking event like this.
Okay. I can even go into some now, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. You got it.
So I talked about digital evolution. It's like a relevance engine will solve your problem and then create repeatable IP that we can spin out. It's like what's now known as classic incubator or accelerator. The professional services entity. Let's build the largest, most secure transactional systems for this new architecture, which is web. It was client server, before, and a number of other things. How do you actually make this robust? It's a very, very simple proposition. If you know how to do it, and the Accentures and the others of the world, at the time Accenture didn't exist, but say Anderson or whoever, are not there yet. They're catching up. It's a very simple proposition. Then when it comes to open source, the idea of being able to grow fast, first of all, the ability to infiltrate enterprises was not understood that free is the best way. So that was a dramatic shift in business model. People go on Google. There was no Google, right, for like enterprise. They would go out there and say, how do I solve this problem? Let me try this code. They get hooked on it, and then they buy the enterprise version. So it's an entire business model shift. And then to be able to democratize the creation of the code and solve bugs, Linux really pioneered that for everybody. As you then shift to APIs, the company was called SOA, eventually called Akana. It's like, why would you rebuild things that are already built? And you don't have to build whole companies if you can just provide your API. If you want to plan a picnic, why would you create a weather service Why not just hit the API and send a zip code, right? So the idea of shifting the model where everybody is going to have APIs and combine them in different ways, that company was really about how do you facilitate that at scale and with the appropriate security and policy that makes it possible. So everybody needed to buy something like that. On the cloud side, it was very clear that the ability to have to provision massive amounts of infrastructure for peak load made no sense. You have all of this unused hardware and software, et cetera. Why not pay by the drink, which is what Amazon started to pioneer. But you can't because of compliance and regulatory issues and security concerns and just flat out psychology that people didn't want to for a long time. They still don't, right? There's still and always will be a need for hybrid, and pendulum swings out and it comes back. So being able to bridge the gap between in and out and run policy across it, that was a company that was very simple to describe. You want to use cloud, but you want to keep your crown jewels inside. You have to keep your data secure and maybe even in sovereign territory. You have to put a governance layer on top, right? Here it is, right? Very simple. Now, as we started to do these various things, a couple convergent exponential trends are happening. So that's the other thing I would really recommend is to look at the exponential trends that are happening. We still don't understand in the human brain what an exponential is. We think linearly. Even those of us who every single day get up in the morning and marvel at the exponential curves that we're looking at, we're still surprised. Like, how did that happen? Oh, yeah, it doubled. Doubling is not something you can understand, because then when it doubles again, it's like, what? How did that happen? Right? So that's happening in synthetic biology, in quantum, in AI, and even in blockchain, which was a dramatic innovation around the Satoshi white paper. So you see all of these things happening and then converging and then playing on each other. So the rate of change is changing. And then you can start to say, well, where do these things converge and where do they apply to different parts of society? Healthcare, education, government, what do you want to affect? And then that starts to become fun because you don't just have to look at demand in. You could say, wow, what's our thesis on this? And then try to find people of domain knowledge to collaborate with. So another trend that I wanted to hit on is what I believe is going to happen in the world, which is ultimately that everyone will have their own identity, that everyone will own their own data. It's not only that they should, but they will. Now, we were quite early on this. This was 2014 when I started to really put my own money against this and put my focus on it. But if everyone owned their own data, then you have to have a place to put it. So everyone's also going to have their own wallet, not the wallet that you could think of like Apple Wallet where you have your credit card stored, but your own wallet that stores your data, your digital objects, your healthcare data, et cetera. So that's where was one of the first ideas that I wanted to bring to the table that didn't just come from a need. In fact, there wasn't a need. It was the idea like, well, why can't we put digital objects on the blockchain and create a real version of the scarcity that we see in the real world? There's only one of these. Even these two glasses, these two cups look the same. They're different. They're distinct individual objects. That's something that the blockchain offers is digital scarcity for the first time. Still, nobody's double spent a Bitcoin. People can steal your identity and steal your Bitcoin, but they can't take that same Bitcoin and double spend it. So that idea, which became the first NFT, was, I think, not from an external source, but come from the ground up, looking at converging trends and say, what would happen if I had a digital beer, could put it on the table? It was the only one. I no longer had it. The bartender picked it up, gave me a real beer. And what if it was network aware and could explode into confetti if the Lakers got over 100 points? Like, you start to riff on that and you have a new segment. So that's where the Vatum company came from, is that view. And then that really emerged to the next concept, which is if you have a digital wallet, if you have things you can put in, you have an identity, how does that really affect what we want to see in the world, which is the evolution of the internet to the next step, I think. And that's kind of what I'm working on now, which is this idea that everything's going to get tokenized, including natural resources. Everyone's going to have an identity that'll be secure and owned. And then we can distribute that transparently and fairly So why would anyone ever be poor anywhere in the world, if you're sitting on $100 billion worth of gold that you own? Doesn't make any sense. What happened in Eastern Europe is you ask the same thing, and then that's how oligarchs are made. They suck all the value out from the people who own the actual resources. But in the future meaning now, I believe we can now put all of these things together, tokenize the natural resources that people own themselves, and transparently deliver it to them in a form that they understand matters to their lives. So you remove people from the unbanked to the banked, you give them their own natural resources, and then you make it usable. That's going to now play into the idea of everyone having an identity and having the ability to, I think, live a better life. And we're from my view, that's the most exciting project that I'm, maybe the fifth of the five to mention that is happening now.
Yeah. So we're talking about really big ideas. These are forward-thinking ideas that the world might not be ready for. We're talking about the creation of the first NFT. We're talking about blockchain when people weren't talking about blockchain. What sort of obstacles did you face bringing these to the world? And I always like to ask this, we talk about obstacles professionally, but it's not siloed, right? We have a personal experience. A lot of times professional obstacles affect our lives. So I'm just wondering, in your data set, how have you dealt with those issues and what have you faced?
Nothing. I have no obstacles. Everything's just been perfectly.
There we go. We're wrapping up.
Yeah, I've had one or two. So it's interesting. I'm so glad you can't go back in time and do things differently, because I certainly would, and it would screw up my whole life right now. Which I enjoy. But oh my gosh, I'll just hit a few of the ones that seemed insurmountable at the time, but ended up not being, through some combination of luck and mental breakthroughs. The first was in the early 2000s, when I became the poster child for the internet bubble bursting. I think I was one of the top. I was, at least according to the Wall Street Journal, one of the top 20 money losers in the United States. Not how I wanted to make the front page of the Wall Street Journal. That my aspiration someday. But now you converge that, which is okay. Roll with the punches. Figure out what happened, what's going on with the markets, what's next. But that happened very much at the same time, where, without going into over details in the time we have, I was kind of left with a 1, 3, 5, and 7-year-old. My marriage did not continue at that moment, and my kids were 1, 3, 5, and 7. And the need I lost more money than I had. I had to deal with a insurmountable, seeming at the time, emotional, crushing pile driver, and at the same time figure out how to support these little beings running around. 3 of whom were not potty trained. I think they are now. I haven't checked recently, but at the time it was really quite a thing. And I would at night was working on what's the next idea. In the morning I would jump in the ocean and try to swim. It was pitch dark, and anyone who wants to swim at 4 a.m. and in this ocean, you can't see an inch below. And I would work, and sometimes I would go in the parking lot and cry for a little while and go back and say, we got to figure this out. And I'd run home and deal with someone sick and someone who needs a sock at school and someone needs this. And I would just go. And at some point I switched my mindset there. I say, if I'm going to spend this much time feeling in a frenzy or sorry for myself or in some ways depressed to the extreme, I could put that same energy into joy and play and humor and things like Burning Man and projects that make no sense other than to bring people together and to experience communal creativity. Creativity is really the antidote to almost everything, and it certainly was for me. And it shifted. I'll give certain people credit that I won't go into here, but it's like it just did. And that allowed me to, I can't say it was easy suddenly, but allowed the mindset that happened when I shifted around the spirit of play and the spirit of creativity versus the spirit of like, what the hell is going on and why me and how do I get through the day, allowed me to become creative again and to listen again and to build again. And I started building again. The next one, which was equally dramatic, perhaps more so, well, I mentioned this idea of self-sovereign identity and what I wanted to do there. So in 2014, maybe it's 2014, early around then, I sold 3 companies that I had started, kind of on a napkin. One is a digital virtual desktop company that now is the VMware's offering in the space. They bought that. Another was the API one, but the third was this one that I talked about with this cloud thing. I sold it to a quasi-governmental organization, and I could tell that it wasn't for me. A lot of reasons why. Shift that I made to start to invest personally into self-sovereign identity drew a lot of people that I had worked with in the past into it. There were some things that happened that created a controversy related to that. And one day I woke up, I remember distinctly this moment. I was driving up north with my girlfriend at the time, and I got a call from the CIO of Barclays at the time. And he said, hey, how you doing? I said, fine. Sounds a little late for you. Why are you calling me in the middle of the night? He said, well, these guys that are working on this project apparently just got fired from the bank. Why? It seems like they're moonlighting on something that you funded. It's like, yeah. Well, I'll call them and find out. I didn't think anything of it for the first month or so. I was like, okay, I'm sorry that they didn't get the proper permissions or whatever. But as I started to get involved in it, it started to become a bigger and bigger controversy. And the company that had acquired mine was doing a $26 billion merger. And we got into a knockdown, drag-out fight. And they brought in the government. And the government decided that they had something. So I started to fight. I had to fight the DOJ, the SEC, the NSA. I mean, I was in big security clearances at the time. When you get thrown out of Mount Olympus, that's not something I would recommend. So suddenly, it wasn't just a business problem. My life was in jeopardy. And that was an intense period of deciding whether to give in and then have that as a part of my track record forever, because eventually you can give in and just cop to something that had nothing to do with anything. But I decided that I would rather die. So it was another moment of saying, I've lived a good life. It's okay. No matter what, even if it's a parking ticket, I'm not going to accept it. And that took me to the brink of madness, but emerged vindicated. And on the other side of it, it's a dramatic story, but an exciting one in the end, because we did emerge on the right side of it in every way I could have possibly hoped, and it even contributed to a lot of the good things that are happening now.
How many days, weeks, months, years did that fight last?
5 years.
5 years of fighting the government.
Yeah, and it was not pretty. I mean, when they want to win, they want to win. In the end, I have to give my brother credit for this. When you know you're right, it's just a matter of finding the ways. But each time I would put that out there, we would call it wiggle room. They just come up with a different story, because at the end they don't care. They just want the win. But we were running algorithms to prove what we're right against like millions of emails and things. And I'm not very good at that, but my brother is. And I just kept hacking away. And one day, I think I was in the shower, he called me to say, I think we got something here. And it was like at the end, like something had to be broken. Even my lawyers were saying, look, you've got to compromise with these guys. And I remember looking at it, it was like, and we ran out there, room full of $1,000 an hour lawyers. They're looking at this and saying, oh, this might be it. And I remember they were presenting it, and I was driving downtown, and just as I was going to hear the result, which is, are they going to suggest you go to jail for, decades, or what are they going to say with this clear information? Just as I was getting the result, I went down into the parking garage, and it stopped. There was no signal. And I'm going, nothing on A, nothing on B, nothing on C. So I get in, and then I come up, and then I go to the elevator, and then there's an escalator. And as I'm going up the escalator, I see my brother at the top of the stairs, and the bars start coming up, and I see it says, dropped in the interest of justice, all charges with prejudice forever. You're done.
We have a round of applause for that. Yeah. So the Eric on day one of that journey and the Eric coming up the escalator and your life thereafter, what do you think was one of the largest changes in you as a human?
I would like to think that I had a certain level of humility before, but I didn't. I think I really gained an appreciation for what matters. Not many people get to go to their own funeral. Like when you're accused of random stuff, even though it was true, it's not that bad, but it is in the business sense, right? And it wasn't true, but you get to see who runs, who's there, how people react. Not many people get to see that. You also get to find out for myself, like, what's my identity? Is my identity the things I do, or is it something more internal? I came to understand more also that the external reality becomes a reflection of your own mindset and your own internal reality. I didn't know that. I still don't understand why that's true, but it just seems to be. And it helped reorganize my thoughts on how I want to spend my time, who I want to spend it with, what I want to see in the world. And you'd think that it would make me want to spend time more efficiently, but actually not so much. And a lot of times I want to spend it less efficiently, but more purposefully.
You've raised a lot of money. How much have you raised probably total?
At this point, it's closer to like $1.5 billion for various projects.
So a significant amount of funds. Do you think that all of these aspects of you come out when you're having these meetings, when you're pitching these large visions, and it's not just the professional, but it's these personal experience that infuse who you are, and that connection is why investors believe in you?
I do, which is going to come to maybe more of a test in the coming years, because I don't think I'm best suited to be CEO. I probably never was, but when you're describing what you want to do, you're not selling. You're not, how do I get this pitch to be accepted? You're really trying to just express authentically what you not only want to do, but you're going to do, with or without them. Like, this is what I'm going to do. This is how the world's going to work. This is how we're going to do it. And hopefully people that are good collaborators with capital become part of that team. But from my perspective, that definitely comes from that certainty in your soul that you're going to do this. And that's different when you're not going to guide it. Lead it as CEO. So that's a shift that I've made in time, and I have to see how I can make sure that I empower others to do that, and can still have that same level of certainty. Certainty doesn't mean that you can't adjust and pivot and change, but it means that your macro view of what the world needs and why you're going to do it at any given time is unwavering. You know why you're taking the next step. The next step might not be the same that you thought it was after that, but you're doing something purposefully, and that comes out. It's not something you put in a deck. It's something that you exude.
Did you always have that, or you think you learned this over time, just practice?
I think I always did. I think most people in this room who believe in what they're doing have that same quality. I mean, very, very often, probably not in this room based on how I understand this group to have come together, but very often people are like, I want to make some money, or there's a niche here. Why don't I assemble some people and we'll go after it? They don't really authentically want to do it, care about it, want to make it their part of what they're about. But I think that's the core of being a real entrepreneur, certainly a successful one, is you're setting out with this kind of view. It's almost like a puzzle. You can see it almost viscerally, and you're trying to find the words and the people to paint that picture that's already there and to bring it to life. And that feeling is key.
It's also, for me at least, the spark that drives me, that feeling that I have this concept, I have this idea, the world needs this, regardless of me.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that wakes me up in the morning. It's the thing that gets me to be able to enroll my team, to enroll investors, and just let's build this for the world.
Yeah, and build it for each other. I mean, you have this kind of concentric circles of what matters, starting with yourself and your own health, mental and physical, because you're not useless to anyone if you don't actually really understand that. And then the people close to you and your community and your team, and it does extend all the way out. But you have to have that core that you're building on, and I know you do. Those who don't have a shaky foundation, and they fall off eventually.
We're in a moment of AI that if you're not currently using it every day, you will be using it every day very soon, and the people around you already are. Talk to me about your different companies and how you're first thinking about impact and impact to the world, and how AI is affecting you and the companies you're working on.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly monumental. I really don't think anybody should downplay its significance. Um, I remember when we were going out and evangelizing the internet, like someday 40 million people will be on the internet. People were like 40 million people. What? That's insane. Like it's so much bigger than even what the internet became. The internet is wildly important, and it's a building block upon which you build so much else. But the idea of like no internet to internet or no web to web, the converging exponentials right now is significantly bigger and more impactful to humanity than we've ever seen. And from an entrepreneurial point of view, a fertile ground to do something, it's never been better. And the speed that you can build something, you can stand on the shoulders of giants now. We didn't have AWS in the past, right? You can't fire up servers and then a topology of software that all works together. That would take you $1 million or more. And then, e-commerce engines, you plug in Stripe in 10 minutes. So all of these pieces that you would ordinarily need to spend time, energy, and money on, somebody else did them. And the APIs now exist, and you can hit those for low cost. So you can now innovate extremely fast. But now the issue of what these exponential curves mean, it's really not, I don't think, fully appreciated by people of what's happening. The reasoning ability of these models is uncanny. It's already at the point where very few people understand it at all, and the people even building it don't quite know why it's doing what it's doing. The explainability factor of saying, well, how did it do that? You can't trace it back and say, well, because it was trained on this, and then therefore it did. It's like, nope. And now we're moving from generative AI, or like say we're augmenting generative AI with agentic AI, which is not just the ability to create different types of artifacts and prompt it and get an answer, but for the AI itself to do tasks with a context that is persistent across them and a memory that it can now do so much that humans would ordinarily need to do. So you're going to go from like an assistant to ask you to do something to a colleague who you can empower to figure out things, get them done, and continue to improve them for you. That is happening at a speed that we never saw before. And what we used to say sometime 2030, between 2030 and 2035, we'd have AGI, artificial general intelligence, which would then go to ASI. I think we're within 18 months. Within 18 months, what you're going to see is reasoning abilities, the combination of the agents and the underlying models that are better at almost any aspect of human endeavor that generates economic value of the smartest humans. And then that'll double and double again, which leaves AGI behind into what they call ASI.
Is this scary? Is this incredibly exciting? What blend are you as you see the landscape?
You can choose. I mean, it's both if you want to take a very realistic view, which I often do, but I'm trying to choose wisely because we do need to put wise constraints in place. There's no inevitability of what this is going to mean for humanity, I don't believe. I think we can direct it, but we have to. Absent direction, we're not going to have, certainly the world's not going to look anything like it does today. So absent a vision of what we want the world to look like, it won't necessarily do that. We have on the one side people, very, very reasoned and reasonable people, will say that with synthetic biology and the ability to create deadly pathogens and 3D print them, also another exponential curve is 3D printing of biology. It converts that with AI, converts that with a number of other factors. Why wouldn't you be able to make a deadly virus that wipes out, a certain segment of society, et cetera? But at the same time, as those things are happening, we have to guard against them. We absolutely have the ability to wipe out every known disease. We absolutely have the ability to create new forms of protein in food at dramatically low cost and have no hunger. We absolutely have the ability to create new materials, to create housing at scale at a rate that we've never seen before. We have the rate to bring billions of people out of poverty, to raise the education level of everyone globally, to lower infant mortality. It doesn't matter which of these things that you want to discuss as humanity's grandest challenges. These things now converge when you have a superintelligence at our side as our companion to focus on these things 1,000 times smarter than the smartest people. I mean, it's incredible what a few IQ points does to solving problems. Now imagine it expands beyond anything that we have ever known to create new materials to solve, these type of challenges. And at the same time, you can recognize that we do live in a dangerous world. And because of the doubling and the doubling of the doubling, whoever's ahead when you hit AGI, certainly ASI, artificial superintelligence, may remain ahead. So this arms race with China is very real. In fact, what you might see is the same type of attention in guarding nuclear silos will now shift to guarding data centers. Because the first thing you'll have to do if your adversary is going to achieve this before you and then double and double and run away with it, no matter how fast you want to catch up, you'll have to go after the data centers. So I think that's the new battleground.
Well, let's talk about the founders in this room. So everyone's working on something. You might have been working on it for years. How should the relationship between these founders and entrepreneurs with what's available in AI, should they be looking at this like a coworker? Is this a replacement for what they're already doing? That's really, I guess, the question: replacement or empowerment?
Definitely empowerment. I mean, there's replacement in some areas. I think what we're going to find is that this agentic trend, which is replacing processes instead of just tasks, is going to find a limit very, very quickly, where outlier cases are going to need humans back in. So this marriage of humans and AIs is the future, at least for the coming decade, I think. Although AIs will be increasingly empowered to do a lot of things that will free up humans to do what they do best. So from an entrepreneurial point of view, it's astounding the productivity that you're going to get out of these tools than what you used to get. The amount of money you need to get to an MVP should dramatically fall. The ways to get to market and the ways to promote your product and to test it and to iterate against it will become easier and faster. So it's really important to stay on top of these tools to be competitive at all.
What's your definition of conscious entrepreneurship?
For me, these things go together very, very nicely. It's interesting. One of the organizations I admire very much is one of my good friends and partners in many of the things I do, Peter Diamandis. He's got a project called X Prize, phenomenally impactful in the world, run now by Anusha Ansari, incredibly brilliant woman. What they're doing, almost in my mind, has almost no precedent in starting new industries and bringing people together to solve big challenges. But when you ask him, would you start this the same way today? He says, no. I would do it as a for-profit. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. It used to be that if you wanted to be conscious, as one would define it, and pro-social and have impact and outcomes, you'd think of it in terms of a nonprofit and how that would work. But I don't think that actually is sensible. What you want is you want it to be sustainable, agile, and you want that part of that sustainability is for the people working on it to do well by doing good. So my idea of conscious entrepreneurialism is a for-profit that can make a fair profit in a transparent way and grow exponentially, but also has a purpose in mind, an outcome that you can be proud of, that you want on your tombstone that says, we did this and it mattered and it really had an effect that when we look back on 100 years from now, it moved the needle for the benefit of humanity and the world that we want to live in.
Amen. What advice do you have to the founders in this room, whether they're aspiring entrepreneurs, they currently have a job, they've been thinking about something, they've been thinking about making the jump into this world called entrepreneurship and founder life and the beautiful roller coaster that it is, or the people that are just in it, they're in the trenches, the roller coaster that, naturally happens when you're trying to create something and tell the world that it should exist?
Well, not to paraphrase Donald Trump, which is not my favorite thing to do. But last night he unabashedly said in his address to Congress, drill, baby, drill. For entrepreneurs, I would say ship, baby, ship. That is the thing. Ship it. Get it out. Get it off PowerPoint. Get it into code. Get it into people's hands. You can now do that at such a faster speed than you could before. You can get feedback. You can adjust and know what you mean to do, but you don't know really what you're doing and where you're going to end up until you're doing it. It's very interesting. I find this in writing too. The act of knowing what you intended to write happens while you're writing it. You can think all you want and you can say, I'm going to write this, I'm going to do that. By the time you're writing it down and putting it out into the world, the thoughts that informs changes it and makes it better and makes it what it was meant to be. That's the same thing with entrepreneurship. You have to ship it and get it out fast. And that's never been more possible than it is today at low cost. So there's no excuse not to get something out and get feedback fast.
If you got value from this conversation, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. This podcast is about sitting down with people who've actually built things and unpacking the mindset, decisions, and moments that make the difference. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.